Tambellini Group's Women in Technology Spotlight series. In these brief interviews, we highlight the career paths, accomplishments, and perspectives of the remarkable women shaping technology strategy in higher education. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by Kay Rhodes. For the past 16 years, Kay Rhodes has served as the CIO for the Texas Tech University system. Now, even though she had technically retired, we know that until a successor is named, she is still working in that role as acting CIO and has over 40 years of experience in the Texas Tech University system. So we're very excited to have you here with us today, Kay, and like to welcome you to our Spotlight series.
Thank you.
I'd like to kick things off by asking you, what did you want it to be when you grew up and why?
That's an interesting question as I thought about this. I had no idea when I was young. I experienced a lot of different things as my family moved around to different, cities in Texas and Oklahoma, and we just enjoyed everywhere we were. And so I didn't really focus on that. I did during that process I learned to meet new friends everywhere we
Mhm.
went and accept changes during each of those moves. And so looking back, it was one of the best experiences with so many new opportunities along the way. And it taught me a lot about change. It taught me a lot about accepting where you are and looking towards the future. But I never focused on what I wanted to be. I was just happy where I was. So during my young years, I didn't really have I want to grow up and be something. I just enjoyed where I was at the time.
It's a very Zen-like approach to it all.
Yeah,
It's nice to hear you dealing with all that change and everything. It sounds like you moved around quite a bit.
we did.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about going from not really knowing what you wanted to be, knowing that you were very good at dealing with change. How did you go from that lack of focus or direction on a particular thing to ascending to this role as CIO at Texas Tech University System?
Well, as I went through school and particularly high school and then on into college, I knew two things about myself. A, I did not want to be a teacher, and B, I loved math. That was my thing. I loved it. And so I on all those placement tests you take and everything, I always scored very high in math and I scored average on everything else. So in college, I majored in math and thought I would work for an oil company as back in the day, then they hired math majors. That was a good place to move into.
Mhm.
So when I was in college, beginning computer courses came into the picture. And so I took Fortran as one of my courses to see what it was like. And I hated it. And they didn't have any other computer courses at the time, but I was like, "Ugh, I don't like this." That was
What
in
did
the
you say the
early to mid
course?
70s.
What was the course
And
called? You said Fortran?
Fortran, yeah, it was a programming language, one of the
Oh, okay.
earlier programming languages. Yeah. And so in the early to mid 70s, an actual computer science degree was first offered at my university. And at some point while I was there, it came out as an actual degree, but not for those that were already in their junior or senior year, which is where I was. So I graduated with a BA in math. At that point in time, when I graduated, I was married and didn't have real ambitions about a long term career or climbing the ladder, but I knew I would go to work. My mom graduated from college. She married my dad and worked 4 years before they started their family. And then she was a stay at home mom. So that was my role model. And I thought, well, that's probably what I'll do.
Mhm.
Little did I know what was ahead for me.
Very different
So
path.
yeah. So when I graduated from college, a life insurance company in that particular area was hiring college graduates, and they were hiring wanted certain majors and or aptitudes and skills that they could train exactly as they needed.
Mhm.
So they contacted the upcoming graduates with certain degrees from the files they were able to look through at the university's career placement center. So I received a call out of the blue for an interview and went through the process, including a lot of assessment tests that I'm not sure how much we could do that today,
Mhm.
the process I went through back then, but they hired three of us and I was paid $700 a month, which was fabulous. I just felt so rich. And what was cool about it is I was hired to start in June. I graduated in May and I was going to be training. And so I was like, I was hired into a job I didn't have a clue what I was gonna do. They were gonna train me, so it was like I was still in school and they were paying me at the same time. which
Mm.
was just fabulous. So they trained us using video courses, and over a period of the summer and then the next year, we were trained in COBOL, JCL, and assembler language, which back in the day, and I don't know if it's true today, it may be, but the life insurance software was all written in assembler language. So
Mm.
I had significant training there. It was great, and so that was the start of my career. I didn't know what was ahead, but that was the foundation, which was perfect for the future. After 4 years in that job, my family, we moved with my husband's job up to Lubbock, Texas, in West Texas. And I had a really good friend from college whose mother was a computer programmer at Texas Tech University System. So she contacted me um, and connected me up with the director of application programming department. And so through one interview, I was hired, and I've been here 42 years this month.
Wow.
Yeah, during my tenure, I moved up through assorted leadership management positions and was offered the CIO position in 2006, which I took. And so it was kind of one of those things, other than really my first job out of college and then this one in Lubbock when we moved here, I've never had to interview for the positions I've had. And when I moved to Lubbock in 1980, it was you just didn't have computer programmers with experience just drop into Lubbock. It's just not somewhere you move to normally, unless you've got a reason to come out here for school or for something else. Of course, it's
Mm.
a large city now, and it's grown considerably, as has Texas Tech. So and I had 4 years experience. So and they had an opening, so I was a good fit. Since then, our system now has 6 entities, 5 institutions in the system administration. So we've grown over the years. And so the job I do has changed over the years. And so there's always been all sorts of challenges. This particular position I'm in now is very unique, as it's not a typical CIO position, but it does oversee enterprise IT for multiple institutions, which share many of our systems. I'm peers with our other CIOs. So each of our institutions in our system, we each has their own CIO,
Mhm.
and we're all peers. And we work jointly together on many, many things. And so that's been a little bit different environment than some CIOs have. And I don't run a network. They run their networks for their institutions and their help desk and things for students and faculty and staff. And so I work with them, and we collaborate all the time and work as peers, which has been a great experience for all of us.
It's interesting to hear that this is almost accidental. If there hadn't been that interview that you were recruited for with the life insurance company, your life and career could have taken a completely different course.
Oh, absolutely. I was definitely in the right place at the right time, and there was a direction in my life. I just didn't know what it was at the time.
Well, we know that in some ways there are no mistakes or accidents. So,
Right, right.
what what made you kept you in this field for so long? I know you mentioned that when you took that computing course or that coding course back in the late 70s, I believe, it wasn't something that really interested you. There was this one language, yet you ended up in getting these other positions where it seemed to be more technical based on those things. So, why have you stuck with it, and what is it about the job that has kept you in this role even today
Yeah,
after?
yeah. Even, nowadays there's so many options and so many opportunities for different areas in the IT world, whether it's on the programming side, application programming, or whether it's more, database programming or help desk or, working on laptops and PCs, whatever. There's so many different avenues for careers nowadays. But back then there wasn't. And so what what I enjoyed really was the application programming part, because you had to solve a problem. And
Hmm.
so, you had to get from A to B. And back in the day, we had, these flowchart templates and coding pads and all this stuff. You really had to solve a puzzle. in your application programming work as you do now. It was just done very, very, very differently back then. Primarily in COBOL is what I was doing. But as I progressed up through our system and had other opportunities for management and leadership, I enjoyed working with the people. I enjoyed the challenges. I enjoyed solving the problems and providing a service environment for faculty, staff, and students. My responsibilities have been oversight of enterprise applications, enterprise systems, which
Mm.
includes governance, a lot of governance oversight. I have 3 different departments I oversee, a lot of facilitation, and a tremendous amount of communication. And so it is important to me that the communication, which is key, is done correctly, is done timely, is done in a way people can understand what is coming and what we're talking about. So in my current role, and the one I've served in since 2006, enterprise systems include our data center, our full ERP suite that are shared by multiple institutions, local application development, call centers for patient clinics at 2 of our health science centers, and then a unified communication environment for our health science centers. So we span a lot of different areas and topics as we serve multiple institutions in our system.
Yeah, that's a big understatement.
Yes, yes, it is. And of course, it's just grown over the years and gotten more complex as each institution has grown. Our system has grown. We started off with the university and one of our health science centers that had many regional campuses in West Texas. Since then, we've grown now to, as I said, 5 institutions in the system administration um, entity, and we are a state agencies. So we follow all of our state guidelines on
Mhm.
from the Department of Information Resources and a lot of requirements we have to do there, which all of our CIOs collaborate on, which is very helpful as we all work together for those, compliance things and everything we have to follow being a state agency.
So would you say in a typical week, are you spending what does a week in the life of K Rhodes look like? Are you in a lot of meetings or are you doing any independent work? What is the cross section that you're seeing?
It kind of depends on the time of the year. Um, I would say a week, and I'm gonna use that, loosely a week,
Yes.
it does include staff meetings focused not only on current issues, but we focus on the future plans based on the strategic, direction of our institutions and what we need to do to meet those plans and how we can service our students and faculty and staff better in those plans coming up in the future. A lot of collaboration with the CIOs from each of the institutions in our system um, is done, whether it's just, you know, Teams messages or whether it's meetings or calls. There's a lot of collaboration there. A lot of enterprise systems governance responsibilities. So we have a whole governance structure for our enterprise systems as we service multiple institutions and work with the functional areas across all those institutions. So there's multiple HR departments, multiple student areas, multiple finance areas, et cetera. So we work with all of them. And so we have a pretty strong governance structure. And I facilitate a lot of that as to some of my staff. I also serve on a higher education state council as we work together, working with Department of Information Resources and the requirements there, as well as the review of legislative IT bills, which comes every other spring as our state legislation meets, and they'll meet again this next spring. And so I facilitate and coordinate the review of the legislative IT bills, along with working with the CIOs and their responses back. So you have a coordinated effort on our responses back on those bills. And then there's some contracts and procurements I get involved in, as well as budget. And then every day is a day of communication. And so with all of these various activities and different kinds of work, it's all very, very, different, unique in its own way. It's very critical that I keep all the balls in the air and don't let anything loose along the way, or we miss out on something that we can't, it just can't happen. We just have to keep things moving and keep things in a collaborative and focused nature.
It sounds like quite a tall order. I mean, when we talk about data governance, you're really dealing with like a very big state government in addition
Yes,
to all the
yes.
governance internally and with your health system and everything. It's quite amazing. Well, I can imagine it would be just an accomplishment in and of itself to be able to keep all these, plates spinning. But is there a particular project or accomplishment when you look back over this vast career you've had that you're particularly proud of?
There's a couple of things that stick out. First of all, I love seeing my staff grow and mature in their job. That's very satisfying, and I do not micromanage. They run their departments, and we work jointly as a team, which I enjoy. The people interaction. We definitely want to serve our faculty, staff, and students the best we can, and so that's the most important thing we do. As far as projects, currently I'm working on a proposal for a complete work from home environment. Right now, the employees, after we came back from the pandemic, the employees work 2 days from home and 3 days in the office, but they
Mm.
really want to work from home. And they did well in the pandemic. We didn't lose a beat. As I don't think many IT areas did lose a beat. You just have to keep it up. And so they're like, okay, it worked. Why can't we continue? So I'm working on a proposal for my supervisor to start a total work from home with office availability if they need it. So I anticipate a proposal will be approved and begin sometime in September. So that's one of the things I'm currently working on that will increase staff morale as well as I'm hoping staff retention, as I know all of us in IT are dealing with retention issues, compensation issues. And so we have to step outside the box and do more to benefit our staff. And so I don't know if we're a little behind in this maybe, but I know that they've enjoyed working, 2 days from home. You kind of have to go along with whatever your executive administration, will approve. And I do think we can get there. So I'm looking forward to that soon. So that's something currently going on. But I will say one project that we did started in early 2020. Our chancellor requested the CIOs, and those are the ones here in the Lubbock area, to research and provide a recommendation for resolution of a critical issue that occurred in our door access system that's used by two of our institutions. So our campuses are large. They have a lot of buildings, and this was a critical issue. And this is the first time the chancellor's actually requested for the CIOs to have a group project. And so we the three of us worked jointly together at the chancellor's request, and we had fun, and we enjoyed the work and collaboration through research and writing the report. And we all agreed while the project was somewhat stressful, it was a lot of fun. And we hadn't worked that way together in the past. So that grew us closer together as well through our collaboration and work. Our recommendation was split into 6 phases over a period of 4 years. And it was well received by the chancellor as well as the presidents of the institutions that are impacted. And so now we finished that in the early 2020. We've been moving along in the project, which I am currently facilitating, and it's a multi-year project, and it's going to be a success. But that was a good example, and one of the few times we've gotten to work that close together on something that was requested by our executive leadership and benefited multiple institutions from the top down.
Yeah, and I can also see when you're talking about, especially with the work remote thing, you talked about, are we behind on that? It sounds like you're at the forefront because it's still something I think so many institutions are struggling with. What should we allow? And
Exactly.
when you hear, you talked about retention, I mean, just attracting new people
Right.
it can
Right.
be very confining if you can't work with your HR and everyone else when you have new roles open that you're recruiting for to be able to offer that flexibility. So,
Well, and as you know, we compete with IT out there anywhere, not just higher ed. And so we've had staff that have left to go to work for another company, didn't have to move out of Lubbock. They can live right here and they're making twice the salary. And we can't compete like that, obviously. But so we have to look at other ways to um, provide the benefits and the morale and the environment our staff want and will stay with us to work in. So we definitely have to think outside the box these days, all the way around on how we retain our IT staff and how we make our work an enjoyable place for them.
It's a great segue into our next question, which is if you have this magical genie who could come down and give you the answer and predicting the future of what's going to happen in higher ed strategy with technology, what would you want to know?
That's a great question, and I think what I would wanna know is we look forward, what's it gonna be like in 10 to 20 years? I grew up through the mainframe punch card days, which was the very, beginning of things, and there's been so much tremendous change over the years. We've seen it happen. I've seen so many changes. But what is it gonna be like? What's the technology gonna be? How are we gonna do ERP? Or is it gonna even be like that? How are we gonna service our students and our faculty and our staff? What is it gonna look like, for them? And how do you move your staff along quickly enough to respond to all the technology changes that are coming? And just, I don't think any of us can envision what it would even be like. Um,
No, I
every 5
certainly
years is
can't.
different for sure. Every 3 to 5 years is different. So what does that look like in 10 to 20? And how do we work with our staff to make them productive and to make them move along in the different technology worlds as we get to experience them?
It also seems not only has it changed so much, but the accelerated pace of change has
Yes.
gotten even more marked as time goes on. So as you say, it's hard to quantify or even like visualize what that is going to mean in the next 5 or even 10 years. So,
I would agree. I will say that in the past, when we moved from the COBOL world to where we are now and moved from mainframe world, there were some people that had trouble making that transition and they couldn't make it and they ended up retiring or doing something else. The staff we see now that are in using the more current technologies, they seem to be more flexible and they seem to be able to change more quickly and adapt better. So I'm hoping that mode of change and that acceptance of change and the willingness to learn new things, and I'm hoping that the staff will, pick it up well and move, continue to move along. Um, and I'm seeing more of that now than I did maybe, 15 years ago.
well, that's a very, I really like you making that point because it's an interesting bright spot and it's something that other people haven't mentioned, but it makes a lot of sense because there used to be this sort of tradition you get a job with one company or you're in one career and that's all you do. But as you have people who have been longer in their career history just having to constantly deal with change and everything, it may not be as overwhelming for them. So even though we have these skill shortages, as you say, even trying to compete with, private industry and other things as the university system and all the remote work and flexibility, that is something that we can look to optimistically in terms of a change that's on the horizon that may be more beneficial.
I think so. And people always want to challenge. They want to grow and learn. And so we have to continue to provide that to them as well.
Yes, well, that is an excellent segue also into our last question here, which is you mentioned you've had to deal with change throughout your life. You've seen higher education and technology go through a sea change. What is the best advice that you've been given that has helped you in your career as you progress to from starting off as, coding and programming to overseeing one of the largest university systems in the country?
There's a lot of things that I've learned. One of the things I learned early on that I have not forgotten is don't waste people's time.
Hmm.
When you have a meeting and you've got people involved, they're away from their regular job, you don't waste their time. You go in prepared, you have an agenda, you get through it, and they need to know what the agenda is going to be. And so nobody's time is wasted. You start on time and you finish, and you don't waste anybody's time, which means you have to be prepared, which means you have to spend a lot of time preparing for meetings. And that's one thing I think that people underestimate in leadership management jobs is the amount of time it takes to be prepared for the meetings and to accomplish what you want to accomplish in them. So always ready to address change, be flexible, be don't waste people's time. But I think the biggest thing that is a part of all of that is honesty and communication. Those two things are the key in the success of everything else you do.
Very sound advice. I especially like the don't waste people's time. How much time have we all spent in meetings that have gone nowhere or reached no conclusions?
Right. A lot if you're not prepared.
Okay, we really appreciate you taking the time today to share with us your
Thank you.
insights and experience. And best of luck in finding someone who can hopefully take over from your illustrious 40 plus years in the
Yes,
Texas Tech
thank you.
University system.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.